Ooh, kill him.
When I say Staffs.
Stafford is an amazing place with talented students that are all around. However, the university must consider what is best for the future of the institution, whether that is keeping a vibrant Stafford campus, moving the campus into Stafford town centre to improve location, or to close Stafford in the future and to consolidate its position on the Stoke campus. The questions that you raise and the comments that you make will be recorded by the union and provided to the board of governors so that they can understand the views of current students when they come to make any decision. This is why we encourage you to speak. While I'm sure that you're all full of questions right now, we'd like to give each panel member an opportunity to actually speak first, just to sort of introduce themselves and to give you some background information on how they've come to this point and to explain the information that they have used so far to make any decisions that are obviously going to influence and shape the decision that will be made next week. We will then move on to questions submitted online before we start with your questions from the floor in the room now. I would just like to say thank you to everyone as well who has made it today in this room, or anyone that is watching this via the live stream. Your participation in the event is another great demonstration of how the student voice can and will ensure that any changes that are being made will always have you as students at the forefront. So I'd like to introduce the panel.
Okay, thank you, Rochelle. Really appreciate that introduction. My name's Michael Gunn and I'm the Vice-Chancellor. If I seem during the course of the evening not to be quite concentrating, I'm afraid I'm at the end of a very bad cold, and you'll be able to tell that I'm not breathing very well, so just give me a chance to get my breath going. I apologise, it's just one of those things. Some introductory comments from me then, first of all, and then I'll pass to Mark Hattersley, the Director of Finance and Infrastructure, who has been leading the project on the estate strategy. The main first point to make is that currently we don't have an estate strategy, and that has presented us with a number of issues and problems that over the past few years. So the first thing is to say we have to have an estate strategy, whatever that content might be, and that estate strategy will be focused on making sure that students are at the heart of everything that we do, and therefore this is an extraordinarily important meeting, but we have been taking on board student views in many different ways throughout the whole process. So this isn't the one and only occasion, but it is an important occasion on which those views may be heard. And we're looking to the foreseeable future of the institution, endeavouring to make sure that its estate supports all that we now do and want to do in the future by way of programmes and other areas of activity that we provide. As we started out the process, we realised that there were some big questions that had to be asked and had to be addressed. And one of those is the issue which Rochelle has described as, let's make sure there isn't an elephant in the room, is whether we should move some, all or none of what we currently provide in Stafford to Stoke-on-Trent. What we, from the outset, have determined that if there were to be a move of anything, it would not include the health sciences programmes, particularly nursing midwifery, that are currently provided here in Stafford, because those programmes are focused on, particularly on Stafford Hospital and the placements that that hospital provides, and it won't work for anybody's purposes if the students are being taught in Stoke-on-Trent. So that's excluded from the question. So the question then is whether we should move other programmes, particularly therefore computing and technology, to Stoke-on-Trent. And that is one of the questions that we've been endeavouring to answer by asking a whole host of people what their views might be. Students, former students, potential students insofar as we can get information on that, staff, other people who work with us, so that we can make a decision which has long-term consequences, that will put us in the right place, and make sure that we can invest in the right estate to provide the right sort of programmes with the right sort of resources for the 21st century. I think at this point that's probably enough for me to say, and I'll hand over to Mark. And more, I suppose, finally to say, we are interested more in hearing what you have to say than in what we have to say. We are interested in knowing what your views are.
Thank you, Michael. As Michael said, I'm the Director of Finance and Infrastructure, and I've been leading this piece of work across the university for this last piece of work for essentially the last 12 months. It's been a thorough and in-depth piece of work. I've been kind of working with Duncan White, our Director of Estates, on this, and with the members of the team, but also other stakeholders, but also students. And we've done this through a number of work streams, and the Students' Union have had representatives on all those work streams. I think it's worth just reminding everyone, we're doing this for the best interest of the university. This is about the university and our students, people in this room, but the people across all our sites, all our campuses and all our courses. There's no other party coming to play in this. It's about what we can do for here today, but also about the future. And it's about the experience, the facilities, the education, but also ultimately about careers, about jobs, about employability. So we've all actually got a common interest, and although whatever decision we will make will perhaps not satisfy some people, and some people will be disappointed by it, it is with the best interest of all that we're trying to do this. You've seen some of the output, and you've seen a statement from Michael in the last couple of weeks. We've done lots of engagement, lots of surveys, and I think it's fact to say also that however much we do, I think people think we could have done more, and we probably could have done more, and you can always do more. We've got to be practical about this and actually try and reach some conclusions so we can move forwards. Part of this process is a recognition that we need to invest in our facilities, in our estate, in our campuses. But also, I think we have to recognise that the whole sector is going through a very competitive and challenging times. So we need to make sure we best direct our funds to get the best outcome, to deliver the best facilities for our students and our staff. And that's what we're trying to do here. It's nothing else than that. It sounds simple, but as you know, it's a very complex subject. And it will affect people. Whatever we do, it will affect people, it will affect students, it will affect staff. We also affect our future students, and we're thinking about those as well. Part of the survey is trying to understand what students are looking for when they're choosing a university. So I could talk a lot about the process, and I'm happy to answer questions, but rather than me kind of speak now too much, let's kind of move on to Ken, and then we'll come back to questions. But very happy to answer any questions you have today.
Hello, I'm Ken Sprosson, I'm the University Secretary. My role in this is mainly to do with the role I have as clerk to the Board of Governors, because as well as being a member of the executive team and contributing to the discussions we've been having, as Mark said, for over 12 months now about the development of an estate strategy, it's been my job to put the necessary reports and paperwork to the Board of Governors, to the Estates and Infrastructure Committee of the Board, which has been meeting fairly frequently, particularly recently. I think there's been 3 meetings in the last 3 or 4 months of that committee to do some of the detailed work that's involved in this important process on behalf of the board. So it's been bringing that together to make sure that at the meeting on the 29th of January, the board will have all the information we can possibly provide. There may still be some gaps, as Mark said, but we've done our best to provide all the necessary information for them so they can make an informed decision on the development of the estate strategy. That's probably all I think I could say at this stage.
Thank you very much, and I've also made the rookie error of not introducing myself. I'm Rochelle Rooswanter, the President of the Students' Union, so now I'm going to pass to Chris Winpenny, who's another officer, to kick off the online submitted questions.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to run through as many of these online questions as we can before we get to questions in the room. First question that we're probably from online is one that's titled Neglecting Stafford. We go through the question and we've got 2 comments below it. Given the recent publicity that Stafford students don't like Stafford, it could be argued that in fact the university is neglecting Stafford campus, potentially triggering negative points mentioned in the survey sent out by Professor Michael Gunn. Does the university executive not think that if it were to address some of the mentioned issues such as gender imbalance, food outputs and accessibility, this may not only improve the student experience in Stafford but also nullify remarks around students not liking the campus? But then got 2 comments, of which the first one is: there's been investment in Stafford over the years, refurbishment of library ground floor a couple of years ago, planned refurbishment of upstairs, only stopped due to potential outcome for the estate strategy. Beacon Building has a lot of work done in the early 2000s, e.g. brick clad. Pedestrianisation between the Beacon and Octagon Building, TV studio and Ruction Lecture Theatre. There has just been There has just been in Stoke because it is bigger and generally in worse condition. Also, a lot of money spent on Stoke campus in the last couple of years from government to improve Stoke-on-Trent by the UQ project. And the second comment on this from another student was, I completely agree with Mitchell. I love this campus, but one of the factors I dislike is the lack of improvement made and funding put in towards it. We're neglected and overlooked consistently, and this is what makes me believe that the university have already made their mind up when it comes to closing the campus, regardless of how much we in the union may protest. In regards to refurbishments made back in 2000, that was almost 15 years ago. How this can be used as a valid argument when other universities are improving the facilities each term is beyond me. And again, the bottom floor of the library, we had the carpet, tables and chairs changed and the toilets improved. Fantastic. Furthermore, the top floor of the library has lost computers for a study space. I understand why this has happened. Why, but did the best computers and monitors need to be removed? Where have they even been moved to? I don't dislike Stafford, I dislike the way Stafford campus is being neglected.
I think the first main point out of that is the number of important points to address. One issue is the need to make sure that we're investing in our estate all the time. And I think it would be fair to say that historically we haven't invested as much as many other institutions have. That's exactly what the estate strategy is about to address. It's to address the needs of making sure that we are investing. Secondly, just to pick up one of the specifics, the hold on the developments around the library was not to do with the estate strategy. It was to do with the potential, as it turned out, that we could sell that part of the estate for an alternative provision because we have too much estate. But what we've agreed to do is to invest the money back into the library, but in a different space on the Stafford campus. And that has to happen anyway, because we've got to have adequate facilities for the students who remain here. Are we neglecting Stafford? I don't think the institution has neglected its sites disproportionately. I think perhaps we could be criticised for not having spent enough on our estate over the last few years. We have been remedying that. Admittedly, more perhaps spent in Stoke than in Stafford, where 2/3 of our students already reside, but more importantly, where far less had been spent on the estate than in Stafford. And so, over periods of cycles, you will get more money spent in one place than another. And over a period of time, you could choose a period of time when Stafford was certainly getting far more spent on it than in Stoke, although that does all predate my time at the university. I think those are the points that I want to make in response to that question. Anything you want to add?
No, certainly there's no policy. We've not said we will not invest in Stafford while this is going on or anything else. It does go through kind of phases, and you have seen more investment recently in the Stoke campus, I think that's fair to say. But we do try and invest where there's a need, and it's trying to get the balance of priorities and funding. We have limited funds, and we've got to make best use of them, and that's partly why we're going through this process. But suddenly there's been no policy of not investing in Stafford, certainly not while I've been here, and I don't think under Michael's kind of leadership either. So hopefully I think that probably covers the points raised, but if there's anything else that comes out of that, please come back to us.
Okay. Next one we've got from online, it's going to be 3 separate questions because 3 separate people have mentioned it regarding Blackheath Lane. So I'll start with the first, go through the comments and go through all 3 sections first. So, hi, adult nurses student here. My place of study is Blackheath Lane, which is a great little campus, but if there are rooms empty in Beakerside, why can't health studies be moved? I, for one, don't want the move to happen, and if this is a matter of money, why didn't it make the most sense for us to move? This would create more business for the shop, bar and restaurant facilities, not to mention make use of rooms that are empty. I'm on placement during this meeting, so sadly cannot attend. I would like to know if this was something that could improve the situation and people's thoughts on this. There was a comment on this that says, I agree, Blackheath Lane is literally around the corner from the Stafford campus, so no doubt Staffordshire University would save money by incorporating Blackheath Lane into Stafford campus and either turning Blackheath Lane into another student accommodation site. Maintenance expenses would practically be reimbursed by student rent, or selling the land to Stafford Borough Council to serve as a better site for the proposed primary school that was replacing the Nelson Library instead. As the road Stafford campus is adjacent to between the campus and halls, there's enough traffic issues as it is and would only be added to presence by the school. Sorry that I went off topic, but I hope it helped make a good point. The second thing I've got regarding Blackheath Lane is the campus has been criticised for having a poor gender imbalance and lack of vibrancy. This has been the case for 15 plus years. How come this issue that everyone is very aware of has never been tackled? Surely simply moving the facilities and nurses over from Blackheath Lane to the main campus would have gone a long way to resolving this. And the final one regarding Blackheath Lane. As far as I'm aware, Blackheath Lane is where the nursing courses lectures are held. As mentioned in the previous post, will this improve Stafford campus by aiding in resolving the gender imbalance, in addition to helping the Stafford campus feel more like a united campus rather than scattered between two campuses in the same town? I've heard there are claims from surveys that have made this proposed move highly controversial, as it turns out only a small percentage of the campus even does the surveys, so the results do not reflect the general opinions of the current students, that Stafford is too rural and has a poor nightlife. In regards to Stafford being rural, I have to disagree. As I myself came to Staffordshire University from a rural section of Wales, where I would have to drive for half an hour just to reach the nearest shops, whereas here in Stafford everything is less than 10 minutes to reach by car, which is much more convenient. If students genuinely feel that the campus itself is rural, due to the distance between the Stafford campus and the town centre, surely this can be rectified by scheduling more frequent buses. As for nightlife, the university offers a mucky-duck event for most Fridays during term time, with reasonable drinks prices compared to most pubs and nightclubs. The only negative side of this is how easily crowded the bar can get on these nights, which could easily be resolved by extending the bar floor space further into the grounds so that the nightclub doesn't lose space maybe, using money that would be moved to the Stoke campus. This would also open up the opportunity to expand bar job opportunities for students and reduce queues at the bar on busy nights if the bar itself was extended. The comment on this one is also like to point out that this first section of post isn't intended to be sexist in any shape or form, as despite male students studying nursing, the male-female ratio is still 1 to 10, estimated not accurate. And that's the 3 questions regarding Blackheath Lane.
Okay, the potential for moving the health sciences courses, which include nursing midwifery, from Blackheath Lane to the Beaconside campus is one of the options under consideration as a part of the estate strategy. It is certainly the case that is far too much estate for the programme that are currently here. We don't need a lot of the estate that we have. The second thing might be about alternative uses for Blackheath Lane were it to be vacated. It's currently not in a development zone activity for most purposes, so actually getting any value out of it is quite limited. And I think that probably, from my point of view, deals with most of the points made, but Mark, you might have some other ones you want to add.
Yeah, I think one of the questions in there was about the gender mix. And we're talking here, Blackheath Lane is an option coming across onto this campus, which would help with the gender mix. Although I think it's fair to say a lot of the students which are based out of Blackheath tend to kind of live at home or travel into campus, so it wouldn't help the probably social nightlife gender balance, particularly the overall numbers on site. But it certainly is one of the options that is under consideration. There's some comments about student feedback and the surveys, I think, about the rural aspects of this campus. Yeah, I think we need to be very clear about the data we've done and the surveys we've undertaken. We've done extensive surveys of kind of current students, of past students, but also of future students. And some of the more recent work was about students who looked at the university in this recruitment cycle, but perhaps didn't come to this university. And that's really interesting for us to understand why we couldn't recruit those. Was it something to do with the campus? Was it course? Or was it something completely different? And the information you've seen communicated about feedback from the surveys and conclusions, I think it's fair to say is a general average conclusion. Generally, we've seemed to have identified that students want a kind of vibrant campus. They prefer a kind of self-contained campus. They generally prefer it within a city centre or on the outskirts of a city centre. But that's just an average. That's the bias. There's lots of people who wanted different types of campuses, so we're not saying that meets all student needs or student expectations. Key for their choice was things like course. Course is still number one. But also then things like facilities. What buildings, what facilities are provided. And again, that gets us back to where we start with this process, which is about investing in facilities for the students. So you can see how it comes full circle. But if we put out a message which says everybody hates Stafford and it doesn't meet any expectations, that's not the message that we're receiving. and it's not the message that we put into the governing board.
No.
We say, on balance, there's a bias towards the city centre type of campus, but it's far more evenly distributed. So it's just one of the factors that we need to consider. I think that probably covers the points, Chris, but if there's other things in there we've missed that you want to just come back on, please do.
I think that's everything that was in there. The next question I've got has been handed to us regarding student employment. With courses such as computing, film and technology, different employers look for a Stafford student rather than a Staffordshire University student. How does the university feel it can manage this relations in the future, and would a move be detrimental with this knowledge?
I think that's a very fair question, and is one of the factors we've tried to understand. Is there something about the programmes being in Stafford that makes them attractive to students and they wouldn't be attractive otherwise? Is there something about the history of provision in Stafford, which is why provision in Stafford is successful, and that wouldn't move to Stoke as a part of thinking about what the decision might be? And is there something therefore also about the employability of students? I personally haven't heard the point on employability, so that's certainly something I'm taking away, that there's a difference between being in Stafford and Staffordshire University. Certainly the latest information I had in relation to computing networks programmes was that it is about the skills our graduates have from this university, and the organisations were coming to us maybe for historical reasons initially, but now because of the programmes and the skills that the students have, that I believe would be transferable were we to move the provision from Stafford to Stoke.
I think if I can just reinforce that, the information we've got through the career service is very much supportive of that. It's the programmes that attract the employers, and we've got excellent relationship. The one that Professor Gunn's talking about is with Cisco, and that's a very high quality organisation, many of you will know, who do come to us. I don't believe it's because we're in Stafford, I do believe it's because we provide the kind of courses that they want for their graduates, and we've got a proven track record with them of producing the right graduates who can go straight into jobs with them or placements with them that they're very, very satisfied with. The other thing I would mention is, again, we're very keen to improve the employment prospects of all our students, and developments such as Unitemps, which hopefully most of you will now understand, and hopefully perhaps some of you are involved in that, are for all our students, wherever they're based across the whole university. And we've got success in finding positions for students both from Stafford and from Stoke, and that's something that will continue.
Next question I've got is titled, Can Stoke handle the mass migration? Given there are already well advertised issues surrounding parking at Stoke campus, which would surely be exacerbated by the closure of Stafford, how does the executive plan to accommodate the impact on the Stoke campus, including the construction and replacement of facilities such as the television centre and specialist labs? And would the existing facilities, including student accommodation, classrooms, sports facilities, be able to handle this influx? If executive quotes that student numbers are down, therefore the impact is not anticipated to be potentially that bad, then surely the executive should be focusing on how to curb the decline in student numbers. And as a comment on this, I agree that Stoke could not take the increase of numbers overnight. If it is decided to move the Stafford campus, much investment would be needed in Stoke. The building of additional halls or very near the campus would be needed. It would also be important that facilities for a subject move are completed before it takes place, i.e. not like engineering move where some facilities were not completely in Stoke and students still have to travel for a few hours in Stafford.
I think the first thing is that no such move can take place overnight, because it is a large move, and therefore there does have to be the right level of investment to make sure that the students moving are moving to be able to use the right sort of facilities. And the sorts of facilities mentioned in the question, film facilities, specialist computing labs, car parking, which we acknowledge is a big issue in Stoke-on-Trent, and accommodation, absolutely issues that have to be addressed before students move, if that's the decision of the Board of Governors next week. And those issues are without doubt high on the agenda, because if we move some of the provision, we have to make sure that it's successful and that the programmes are at least as high quality as they currently are, if not better. Sorry, there's another point I was going to make. It's slipped my mind. It was early on.
I mean, one of the questions there was can Stoke handle the move if that was the decision? We didn't mention at the start, I think, we have a lot of spare accommodation. And one of the challenges we've got is we can't grow into that at the moment. We're trying to improve our recruitment. We want to recruit more students. But it's also a highly competitive market. And again, we're back to investment in facilities. So we have surplus accommodation, so we don't need to build lots of new accommodation. But there's still a kind of final piece of work to be done once the decision is made to actually look at the detailed plans of implementation, which will then come back to the timing and what needs to be built and the specific requirements. So we recognise some investment is required, but it may not be as big as people are expecting. So there's no significant number of new buildings. Yes, we do need to look at the student accommodation, and we know that if we were to transfer from here, then potentially at this point in time we would require further accommodation. But the alternative is we have to downsize both campuses because we can't grow into the space at this point in time, and we need to be more efficient in that utilisation. I think there was a comment about recruitment. I assure everybody here today that recruitment is high on our agenda at all times. We need to recruit more students, and we are trying to recruit more students all the time. And by giving good experience here, whether it's through the course, through the academic provision, through the facilities, but also just a good experience as a student. Because the best way for us to recruit is for all you to have a good time here, to get a good qualification, to move on, get a good job or whatever you want to do next, and tell people about how good that experience was. And that's our key focus. So I would assure everybody in this room that's what we are trying to do at all times.
That was the point that I intended to make, and I apologise. Our priority is student recruitment. We have the estate strategy issue as well. We have a lot of great courses taught by a lot of great staff and a load of great students currently experiencing those. It is absolutely vital that we put our efforts into student recruitment, and that is what we're doing. We are having some current difficulties with student recruitment. We haven't recruited as many as we would have liked, but that does not mean to say that our attention is not focused on that ball. It most definitely is. And certainly current students reflecting on your experience can contribute positively to recruiting students for the future. And we would encourage you to think about that.
While we're talking about recruitment of student numbers, another question is coming regarding this. Has the recent press coverage adversely affected students for next year's decision to study in Stafford? And therefore, along with the movement of engineering students, have reduced the number of students on the campus to the point where closure could be the only option anyway?
We've not seen any evidence that there's any causal link between those 2 points. There could be in some people's minds, of course. More likely to be for students living closer to the area than elsewhere, because this doesn't necessarily get covered in the media that people read further away from the campus. But we don't see any evidence of a causal impact between what we're talking about, which is talking about investing in the right way for students of the future. It's not about not investing, it's about where we invest and how we invest to make sure that the provision is as good as it possibly can be in the best space that it possibly can be.
Next question is titled Restructure the Courses or Campuses. One thing I've never understood is this. Stoke campus is a busy place. This is evident by the lack of parking, the availability of several different food venues, no complaints about gender imbalance, etc. Stafford campus is getting pretty empty. We've never had complaints about parking. A lot of rooms lie dormant and empty. Some facilities don't even get used. So somehow your response to this is to think about closing Stafford campus and make us flood an already empty campus. Why not solve all your problems by moving some Stoke students to Stafford? Currently, the film of school, sound and vision appears to be split across both campuses. Despite the fact Stafford campus has fantastic facilities for those courses, including the newly replenished media stores and a fully fledged TV studio. So why not bring these courses down to Stafford?
I think that it's an interesting question which we have considered, but we don't think there's any evidence which would suggest that we would be able to recruit to the programmes in Stoke if they moved to Stafford. So we haven't had that particular issue on the agenda. Linking the two questions, the fact that we've got the provision that we have in Stafford has not got to the point where, therefore, we must close it. We are rattling around in a lot of our estate, as Mark has said. We do have too much estate. So whatever the outcome of the estate strategy is, we would have less estate, wherever it is. That is undoubtedly the case. And it's a question of where best we place our energies and our resource to make sure that the estate supports the student activity best.
Just picking up again some of the data and some of the surveys we did, we asked some questions about how current students would you move, and I guess general results of that was Stafford students were happy in Stafford and Stoke students were happy in Stoke, and neither particularly wanted to move, and that's more evident than the students who are applying to the university. Students applying who've not been here were more flexible, so didn't seem as set on one particular campus or the other. But certainly we couldn't find any evidence in there that said Stoke students were keen to move to Stafford. So it's not something we've kind of pushed at this point in time.
Next question is more of a statement, but it's considered engineering not considered. Why is it that when engineering showed majority opinion to not move to Stoke campus, engineering was moved anyway? Why were their opinions not considered, and why should we trust our opinions will be considered for this decision?
I think that's a fair point to make, because anybody who expresses a view and that isn't the outcome will always feel their views have not been taken into account. That's natural and understandable. I'm an academic lawyer, and there's a lot of case law which makes absolutely clear that you have to consult. Consult has to be valid, it has to be open, it has to be listening. But you always get challenged if the outcome isn't the outcome that the person consulted wants. What I would say to you is that we have listened to every point of view made. We did listen during the part of the engineering discussion, but it's not the only point. So no group has had a power of veto over the decision. We've had to take into account a huge amount of evidence and data. We look at that as objectively as we can, and that leads us, more the Board of Governors, to the decision that it needs to make next week. But if anybody feels, I'm not going to say anything because I'm not going to be listened to, we would really wish to alter people's views, because we need to hear. We hear the same points of view at the moment, the same points being made, which is a relief that we're not hearing lots of new points, because all the points that we've heard have genuinely been taken on board as a part of the decision-making process which reaches the Board of Governors next week.
Okay, next one we've got is obviously slightly different tone to all the others. It's titled Stoke solves most of the problems with Stafford. This one's got a few comments at the end of it. While moving the university away from Stafford will have some negative impacts, mostly an effect on the town staff reductions, the Stoke campus already has the solutions to many of the problems associated with the Stafford campus. Worst aspect of the Stafford campus: food outlets, 28%. Stoke campus has many eateries plus plus coffee shop style outlets. Plus there is loads of takeaway places within minutes of the campus. 2. Inconvenience or accessibility, 24%. Stoke campus is next to the train station. 3. Social activities, 20%. There are more of these happening in Stoke, plus the SU venues are generally more busy than Stafford. There is also more to do in Stoke as the city is bigger. Gender imbalance is not a problem at the Stoke campus, it is pretty close to 50-50. It would be nice to fix these at Stafford, but most would not be possible as there is not enough students to allow them to work. E.g. Stafford could have 3 CAFs, but the current one is not really that busy, so who would use them? Legends often holds events that many wish were unattended. Not much can be done about the location other than move. Would cost more than moving to Stoke. Transport could be improved, but would probably always be a problem for the campus. Gender imbalance. You could switch some courses between campuses. Would cost money, and people currently in Stafford don't want to move to Stoke, and Stoke students don't want to move to Stafford. The only options are 1. Improve Stafford campus. If they did, there would not be enough students to use the improved social facilities, catering, etc. 2. Move students at Stafford. The university number of applicants is not really growing for that to happen. 3. Leave Stafford as it is. People keep complaining about the above issues. 4. Move to Stoke. Fixing most of the issues students have. Also, Stoke campus could improve as there be more students to use social facilities, catering. Also, the university has a large amount of space which isn't used. This is a waste of money. Cost of heating, maintenance of the building. Saving off some spending the money on students makes sense. Reduction in the number of sites will also allow for future savings which can be spent on improving the experience of students, e.g. inter-site travel and travel reimbursements, inter-site post, IT connections, duplicate facilities, 2 libraries are more expensive than 1 enlarged library, etc. Now there's a few comments on this which I'm only going to read to because one isn't the politest thing in the world. The first comment I can read back is, "Hi, thanks for your comments, they're very valuable, but I think you need a little contextualisation to this. The university performed this survey in 2012, when our union food outlet's not been refurbished in 2 to 3 years. Our food quality is low and the general standards of union facilities are not great. Having spoken to students, a ton has changed since then, and I believe that just taking a random sample of students would show you that. In the general student consensus that the bar is a nice vibe, is pleasant to be in and provides good food. Additionally, the university-run cafe also sells excellent food. The main reason for the Stoke 4 outlet is that there is, to get to any individual outlet, you can often take a track between sites. So 4 are really needed. Gender balance isn't easy to resolve by moving more sensible female heavy courses to Stafford, and you'll find nightlife will improve in line with that more students wanting to come out. Accessibility should also be brought back to the survey date. This has largely been resolved due to changes in the bus service and in addition to the minibus service. However, you'll find that Stoke's campus buildings are tired and in desperate need of replacement or heavy regeneration. That is a problem that only amplified if you move 3,000 more students there, and this will increase demand for new, up-to-date technology, including our multimedia-paying state-of-the-art film studio, which would have to be completely rebuilt, custom in Stoke, despite only being 5 years old. More in-depth investigation into the surveys is definitely required. They are out of date and unlikely to reflect the ever-diversifying student opinion. And the second comment that I can read out is I do agree with your points. Personally, my view is that Stafford campus should not move. However, I do see how the closure would save you the union money. It's clear that some buildings somewhere need to go. To get a decent critical mass in Stafford would require a significant increase in the number of students, and moving that many from Stoke could result in 2 campuses that only sort of just about have critical mass for something where 1 campus could have critical mass. The Stoke campus would need significant investment to provide the facilities required, additional buildings, halls, etc., but could be achieved. The move would have to take a few years, it couldn't happen overnight. While the Stafford SU venues have been refurbished this year, I don't think it's made much difference. Daytime use may be up, but night time is worst I've ever seen. It seems it has been 100% been affected by the engineering move. Even though the changes, in my view, of the Stafford campus has gone down since the engineering move. And that's all the comments and questions for Stoke solves most of the problems with Stafford.
My first comment would be that those comments are one good reason why we want to hear from students, because they are well-made points. That doesn't mean to say I'm necessarily agreeing with them, but they were a lot of well-balanced points. I wouldn't expect most people doing the Stafford survey to agree with the first set of comments, because actually they are completely contrary to what the majority of Stafford students who completed the survey would say, which is their preference for staying in Stafford, but shift some of the or improve the provision that's made here in terms of the facilities. I think that is what we expect, and we expect to hear from a proportion of students today.
Just to clarify those, we've got 5 more questions that have been submitted online and through to the union. Next one of these is regarding staffing. I can't imagine that a consolidation of both campuses will mean that all courses currently running in Stafford will continue. I would also presume there would be an abundance of the state catering cleaning union staff. How many redundancies are anticipated if the single campus option is taken?
The first point about programmes is that there is no part of the estate strategy which currently would suggest that any of the programmes that are successfully recruiting should be dropped as a part of the transfer process. Programmes come and go according to student demand. If students don't want to take them, then we can't have the programmes put on. It's too early to say anything in relation to job issues, but we will comment on that at a later point.
Next question I've got is regarding the local community. From the feedback given, the only real benefit of being dual site is not being dual site is the financial savings. How much consideration has been given to the effect closure of the campus will have on the local community and businesses that rely on us?
I think that's a very fair question to ask. The move certainly makes economic sense in some very difficult financial times that everybody is experiencing, and many universities are experiencing extremely difficult financial times. And we do need to make sure that we improve our student experience, performance first, and secondly, our financial performance. Taking into account, obviously, the adverse impact on local businesses should we move computing and technology from Stafford to Stoke.
Yeah, I think it's, as part of consultation, we will take those factors into account. But as I came back to right at the start, it's about making sure that you as students get the best experience, and that's what we're trying to do here. And that's the key focus, but certainly all those other impacts of any of the decisions we will take into account as part of the process.
Next question I've got is titled Bring the Town to the Uni. This one's got 3 comments at the end of it as well. The students will agree that we do not want primary school kids running around the campus. If that plan goes ahead, instead of having a primary school going on the university site next to the MOD base, that will be the biggest in the UK as mentioned on the BBC News, why not instead make it a Tesco Express or similar, as students will then not have to travel so far to get a tin of something. This opens up more jobs for students on campus and everyone will be much happier. This is certainly no reason to close down a perfectly good university the students love, as they have challenged you. And 3 comments on these. There is already a shop on campus which never seems overly busy. Don't see a need for 2 shops in the area as there is very little housing. I can understand the logic behind this idea, as walking 20 to 25 minutes with a week's worth of shopping can be a pain. But as said above, the campus already has a shop to accommodate for basic needs. But I agree that we don't want a primary school kid running around our campus, as this would provide disruptive to our studies. Even through fences would most likely go up to separate the school from us. But personally, I think if Blackheath Lane campus was moved to Stafford campus, the university could benefit from selling Blackheath Lane and its land to Stafford Borough Council to serve as a replacement site for the school to be built. That way, we remain undisturbed to a degree during our studies, the school will still be built and the traffic wouldn't be potentially as bad as on the main road between MOD, Stafford campus and the halls as predicted after the school was built. It was built on the Nelson Library site. All of those on the same road are just asking for mass traffic jams. And the final comment on this, the problem with the shop that exists is beyond some sandwiches and snacks it sells. Pretty much nothing to actually have a proper meal every day of the week. Noodles and cinema does not contribute as a proper meal. Another idea is for the university to perhaps partner with Tesco's home delivery. I'm okay with paying delivery costs, which currently existing £3 to £5 depending on the day, but many are not, and this would help a lot of students and save much time. Given it would drive more business to them, I can't see why they would object. Perhaps have deliveries on a certain time, on a certain day, etc., to save costs and so on.
I'll make a comment about primary school being on the campus. There is no chance of intermingling of university students and primary school pupils, if for no other reason that no primary school provides access to its site to anybody who's not entitled to be there, and no primary school would ever operate a school from which its pupils could leave without permission. There's a massive safeguarding responsibility on primary schools. they're simply too young to be allowed out on their own. There's no chance of any intermingling that those questions suggest. I think that's something we've got to be absolutely clear about. And if there were any suggestion that a primary school might be considering that, we would not be engaged in these discussions. For us, what matters is a high quality experience for these young people being brought here as part of the expansion of the Ministry of Defence site, but that we want to contribute to their education, and that is really what matters.
Yeah, just to pick up on a couple of those, I suppose. The primary school was opportunistic kind of transaction, effectively. We were approached whether we had any surplus buildings, and we looked at what we could do, and that's how the Nelson Library came up. And again, it's because we had surplus accommodation, not taking a library out, it's been replaced. The timing, I think, meant that was the only feasible option for us. With Blackheath Lane, one that's referred to, they need the primary school before that could have ever been made to work in terms of timing. So that was the only one that could work, and is one we seem to be progressing with. The other use was about talking, use of that site as a Tesco or something. I suppose from my point of view, if I could get a supermarket to come on site, it would be a great financial transaction. We would get a lot of money from it if you could get something like that on site. But we would not have the traffic, the footfall, to meet something like that. So it may give a good experience to students who are on site and need that facility, but you would not get somebody like Tesco looking at anything on this campus, unless there's a huge housing estate being built around here, which might be in the future, with the MOD coming back. But certainly this point in time, that would not be a viable use of that building. The other prospects you talked about other options for Tesco home deliveries, I'm sure that's something we could look at in conjunction with the student union and with our commercial services. There are ideas which are not linked to estate strategy but could be followed up separately. Happy to do that with other parties.
And for the final last two questions. This one is entitled Waste of Money. It suggested that the estate strategy is about making the best use of money. So where is attempt to move into some fantastic facilities that Stafford has, notably the TV studios is one example, and some of the buildings in Stoke are in diabolical state. Every penny spent moving the great facility at Stafford campus over to Stoke is a waste of money, especially where there is absolutely no indication that the Stafford students are happy. I'm also sure Stoke students would be more than happy to move to Stafford if it meant having better facilities. Not only this, the university fails to recognise its main income is from local students. I'm not sure the people of Stafford will appreciate being forgotten. After all, there are several local universities that I'm sure students are willing to go to. And we've got a comment here of, I agree. The way I see it, who cares if a few students on our campus think it's too rural or poor nightlife? I come from rural Wales, so trust me, it isn't rural. I'd have to drive half an hour just to go to Tesco, whereas Stafford's Tesco is less than 10 minutes drive from the campus. As for nightlife, we have Mucky Duck on Fridays, which is reasonable in drinks prices as a student. I admit I like to go out and blow off steam from time to time, but I think the quality of our education is much more important than having a brilliant nightlife. So personally, I think Staffordshire University should use the money intended for expanding the Stoke campus to accommodate Stafford campus move, should instead be channeling into Stafford campus to make it even better campus than it already is. Ignore the rural comments and extend lounge and legends to save money. I'd say a bigger bar means more staff opportunities, handy for students who need extra cash, and reduces queues for drinks on Friday night. Maybe even reinstate cleaners too.
I think the first thing about, which was the heading of the item, about the waste of money, is without doubt what we're doing is balancing up the spend of stay in Stafford, the spend of move of the provision to Stoke-on-Trent. That is unquestionably one of the issues that we're addressing. The big picture is that we have to invest in our estate anyway, and we have too much of it. But the balancing there is absolutely vital. We will save quite a bit of money if we move some of the provision to Stoke-on-Trent. And over time, that would offset, without doubt, the capital spend that we have to engage with. Most of the latter comments were from the person in Wales who made the same comments. in response to an earlier question. The one thing that I would say is that we're not going to ignore any comments. We're not going to ignore the fact that some people regard the Stafford campus as too rural, and we are not going to ignore the fact that many people regard that as not an issue. So be absolutely clear, we're not ignoring anything, and we won't follow any advice or suggestion that we should ignore anything.
The very final question that I've got here is regarding entertainment. The campus was also criticised for lack of entertainment and catering facilities. I'd argue this simply isn't true. The Range turns over hundreds of thousands of pounds a year on catering alone, and so far since September has run over 100 student events in addition to its regular union-run events. So that's the question and opinion that's been put forward.
And I think the refurbishment of the student union facilities here has paid dividends, and I'm delighted that that's the case.
And that's all the questions that I've got from online.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris, for that.
Hello.
So one moment, I'm just experiencing some technical difficulties with the microphones.
Hello.
So unfortunately, you're just going to have to shout. Okay. So now the microphones are working. So unfortunately, you're just going to have to shout. Could we please see how many people provisionally want to ask a question? So we can maybe do it in rounds of 3. So you could just make your hand sort of known to wave. So I'm guessing we can just initially take questions as they come then instead of rounds of 3, if that's okay. So should we start with this on my phone? Yeah, that's fine. So do I see a hand waving? Okay, I'm going to go with the gentleman with the hooded jumper.
Having the primary school on our doorstep is actually a great opportunity for games courses. We already have good links with people who make Lego games, things like that. When you're studying play, there's nothing purer than kids playing playground. Having them as testers for games, that kind of thing, is a good opportunity that we shouldn't miss, I think.
I think you make a fair point. It's a bit like the point also of if you want to understand the use of social media, or if a business wishes to design a web design program, don't get people of my generation. I'm deadly serious. People of the generation who use the facilities. So you make a very important general point, and we need to be thinking about how we work with young people if that's an opportunity. Have to be very careful because it's got to fit with their curriculum, but it's a very fair point, and especially if the games could have some educational advantage recognised. And we do try to work with a lot of schools, particularly secondary schools, for obvious reasons.
Additionally, having primary school kids grow up next to Stafford campus is great for recruiting down the line. It's a great advertisement. It's a long-term goal, but it's another factor.
And that's fair comment. We have actually historically worked very hard with primary schools. Unfortunately, we're struggling to see any evidence that the work we've done over many years has had the positive impact we believe it should have done. You are right that if you don't get in there early about the potential for people going on to university, then that opportunity might disappear. And unfortunately, some people seem to get excluded from university being right for them as a part of the process of being in school, when actually, had they had their eyes open to the opportunities, that might have been something that they could have taken advantage of earlier. So I take your point's taken, and we do work with schools, and we have historically worked with lots of local primary schools in both Stafford and Stoke-on-Trent.
Thank you for your question. Fee?
I've got a couple of questions actually. One of the big ones that's been sort of mentioned earlier on is about the cost of moving the specialist areas. What is that actual cost going to be, and where you're going to put sort of stuff like that? because there's very little room there to actually build a new TV studio actually on the site. But when you start looking at it, it's sort of, you're limiting, if you move everybody over, there's limited space there to increase your portfolio of courses. And that will then attach to the recruitment, so you get less recruitment, so you won't get the changeover as much as possible. But when you're sort of looking at that, is looking at the mature and part-time provision as well. It's about the increasing of, the provision of helping the student parents with childcare and stuff like that. It's very limited in Stoke as it is. But there's going to be a sudden increase, and then you're going to cut down on your recruitment of that sector, because you get a lot of probably mature and part-time from Stafford coming here, but they won't go to Stoke because it's just that too far. Even though it's only 90 miles, it's that little bit far. So there's sort of issues like that, and have those been addressed? And the sort of last issue is more to do with housing. In Stoke, there's already a shortage, a massive shortage of housing for students as it is. Students are already being taken for a ride at the moment with the cost of housing in Stoke itself. But how are you going to, how are you going to help provide housing for, the thousands of students that go across there, but also house the, potential new intakes? Because, at the moment we know that, the halls over there isn't fit for the amount of numbers that it possibly could be. So has all that been taken into account as part of the argument, and what's your response to that?
Okay, I think a number of points for me to pick up, and Mark will no doubt have some. I'm not going to talk specific financial figures, but the cost of building the provision in Stoke-on-Trent is a part of the process. In response to an earlier question that Chris read out, I didn't suggest that makes this an easy issue to determine, because there is a downside, financial downside, absolutely, as a number of the comments suggested, from if we were to move, say, computing and technology to Stoke-on-Trent. Would we constrain our ability through space requirements to grow the provision? No, because there is actually a lot of potential for growth in terms of new buildings in Stoke-on-Trent by using our existing land. We're not talking about buying any new buildings in Stoke-on-Trent. The idea that we're buying the Civic Centre is simply not an option. It's not something we consider. That's not where we're going. We've enough land, buildings, opportunity to develop buildings in Stoke-on-Trent were we to move the provision, so it does not constrain that opportunity going forward. Thirdly, our understanding of the cost of living in Stoke-on-Trent is that it is amongst the lowest in the country of a university town. But what I would like to do is pick up any information you've got, Fee, on the point of view of students being ripped off, I think is the way you put it, because that is something in which we'd be interested. But student accommodation and having the right amount of facilities is a part of the process. And we've worked with the County Council and the Borough Council and the City Council. And one of the options in terms of the City Council is that they have plans, as does the Borough Council in Stafford, for housing growth, which will generate housing that students could utilise in the short and longer term.
I think you've covered the queries there. I don't know unless there's anything else we've not covered.
Next question.
Given the hypothetical situation that this meeting goes ahead and the move is confirmed as being a certainty, how many years will it be roughly until it starts to affect students who are here now?
Okay.
I can't see it affecting final years who are here now, for example.
There's no chance of that.
But, I mean, would it even affect first years now?
Well, the first thing is there's final year students currently, no, absolutely no way. There's no way there could be a move in for 14-15. It is literally impossible. The plan that we've expressed has been that we would move in 16, but we think we've probably got to explore 2015. if the figures suggest that the financial benefits would be substantial. But were we to do that, we would come back and talk to the first year students, the students that would be affected by that, and listen to what they would prefer their options to be for their final year study, because that's who it would affect. So current third year is absolutely not, current second year is absolutely not.
Thank you. Any further questions from this side of the room?
Yeah, I've got one. There's been a lot of talk from Michael about estates being linked to poor recruitment. Would it be fair to say that our dire league table performances are more to blame for that, and that the time and resources being wasted on this we've had to spend improving our academic standards?
I think that's a fair question. If I seem to be overlinking them, I apologise. It is a factor. As Mark said, the most significant factor is without doubt the course and its quality. And we have been trying to work on the league table position. Some of the things that you might have observed in your time here, for example, would be we've placed far greater emphasis on the National Student Survey than had ever been placed prior to my starting here. And why? Well, first of all, because we want to hear what the students have to say. And the National Student Survey is undertaken by eligible final year students. I can never remember who's not eligible. So I'll start from the proposition that it's final year students. And you get the opportunity to do a similar survey during the earlier years. And we always take those surveys on board, not only at the survey level, in terms of the outcomes, but also the comments that are made. And the NSS feeds into league tables. So the better you talk about the university in the NSS, the more likely we are to go up. That would be one example, and we have had for about the last 18 months a league tables management group, which is looking at, are we simply doing something wrong in terms of the data we submit, so that we actually should be getting a better result if we submitted the data right, but also to make clear that what we're trying to do is constantly improve the student experience, listen to what the students have to say and respond to that, and make sure that you're as successful as you can be in terms of progressing through the course, completing and getting jobs. So the Staffordshire Graduate Initiative is designed to make it more likely that you'll graduate with jobs over time and have that impact across all students, not just students starting in 2012 and beyond. It's a very fair question, but a way of answering it would be the majority of my time is not spent on the estate strategy. It might be the majority of Mark's time, but I'm as concerned and concentrating on student recruitment and our reputation as an institution as I am on anything else.
Okay, I do have a second question, and that is, why didn't the union and the university inform students who were consulting on selling the library? It was an opportunistic option. So by opportunistic, do you mean it was a few months' notice?
It was literally a very short notice period, and it was commercially sensitive, so we had no option. We either had to take advantage of the opportunity, get rid of a bit of spare estate,
okay. So
or not.
If there were future opportunistic bids for, let's say, the Octagon, if it was not being used, would you also sell that at very short notice with no warning? Or
No. We knew we could move. I mean, a part of our process, as soon as it became obvious that that was an opportunity, was could we move the library elsewhere on campus and provide at least the same quality of service, if not better? The answer to that question was yes. If you ask me, could we move everything that's in the Octagon elsewhere on campus, the answer would be no.
Yeah,
so we wouldn't sell it.
Just an example.
No, well, there isn't.
Okay.
There isn't anything else we could do that with. That is, I think, the only. I can't think of another building. You see, we couldn't do it with Blackheath Lane, the length of time to do that. If we could have consulted in some way, we would have done so.
Okay, and finally, there's been no mention of Lichfield campus in all this. Are they going to be affected similarly, or are they being left out?
Not necessarily. It's very, very small. So it's at the moment it's not in our purview. It's the big questions that are in our site. But it really is extremely small. Unlike Stafford, where you know, people think it's massive with huge numbers of students, and there are a lot, and each and every one of you really matter. It's not quite as full of students as people believe it to be on the basis of the size of buildings.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm going to move on. I'll come back to you. Take the lady with the green hair.
I've got a few points. Now, I grew up in a very large city, moved here because it's not a very large city setting. Late nights, come out of the library building and you're surrounded by this green, very, very nice campus. When I read that the library had been sold, there's one point within the library sale that's not been raised, and that's that several acres of land are going to be lost from the campus, but we've not been told where. Now, we have parking permits currently, so there's already provision in place for the possibility of parking issues occurring. So is the 3 acres, where is that going from?
It's a very fair question. I apologise. It is something we should have done, because when somebody early on made a comment, 3 acres, we're not going to be able to park on campus. 3 acres is a minute plot of land. It's basically the area around the Nelson building. So it would be a few car parking spaces, but only those spaces that are around the Nelson building. But I think what we will do is we will get a map and draw the area, and you'll see it has almost no effect upon the use of the campus.
My problem is as well is if the fence is too close to the octagon,
yeah,
you still have the issue of students coming across, even walking to the car park will still be close to young children, and not all of us want to be harassed by young children.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, sometimes they're not the nicest people in the world to have to walk past.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
one of those things that kind of worries me. What are we losing?
Yeah. There is still quite a distance, as memory serves me, between the Octagon building and the edge of where the school would be. Remember that space of the school would be more their playground area. It's not the school building itself, so it's not in use all the time. But I think the best solution is to make sure a map's made available so you can see, and then you could come back and ask questions, because if there are those sorts of concerns, then we can share them as the school develops and say there are bits of the area that you need to be careful thinking about. And if there were any interaction between university students and primary school students, it's something we would have to deal with very early on and take very seriously, because you've always got the safeguarding issue for kids who go up to year 6, age 11. So they are young, very young children, and by definition vulnerable.
Also, this is my final point about the recruitment of the campus. Now, I'm a very avid cinema goer. I'm frequently. In the Odeon, specifically within Stoke-on-Trent, I often see Staffordshire Uni adverts come up within the advertisements. I've, within those advertisements, not really heard mention of the specialist courses that this university offers, such as digital forensics or network and security, which when I do open days, people I didn't even know this was a thing, and they want to do the courses, and they're not necessarily even here for that course. You know, they've come to look at games design. And I think more focus needs to be put on those courses, especially further afield, given that there's only half a dozen universities that offer computer forensics. There's a lot of opportunity for recruiting for it, because most colleges up and down the country don't even know it exists. And I think that's something that might help gather recruitment and necessarily not have to move the campus or have a problem with population.
Whether it affects the decision to move or not, hear that, but the general point is wherever it is, we've got to get the marketing of our programmes right. And we know we haven't had that right. The cinema adverts, I'm glad you saw them, were not designed to target particular programmes, but to generate general interest, then to follow that up to make sure that it's possible to find out the sort of courses that we do. but the Director of Marketing and PR has made a commitment to ensure that all programmes are properly marketed, and that actually, surprisingly, will be a shift in the way we've done things. So thank you for that, appreciate it.
Any further questions? Fiona?
With the decision so close, you said you can't comment on staff redundancies. Why is that the case when we're so close to the move or the decision, and it's such an important factor for everyone involved?
I think the point is would be the audience. If this was a different audience, I might say something. I don't think it's appropriate in this context. I'm just thinking about the people who hear the messages. That's all.
I'm going to go with the gentleman.
You said that the area around the Nelson Library currently would be sold, and that around the Nelson Library at the moment would probably be the school, and the playground would be nearer the auction. But have you thought of the noise that little children do create, and there's a few hundred of them running around playing, and you know, I live a couple of streets away from the school at home in London, and above the traffic in London, you can still hear them.
Yeah, we have taken that into account. We've actually been more motivated through this by the too much estate. Here's an opportunity for us. This is an educational opportunity. Sounds right for us to support it. We have thought about that. We think the distance is likely to be sufficient. I take on board what you're saying to allow us to minimise that, but the concerns that are being expressed about that are certainly things that we will take on board as a part of the process of looking at how that actually develops. But how close it might be and what the usage might be put to, you'll see the map, and so you'll be able to see how close the perimeter might be. That won't tell you exactly the use to which the person would put. The school is planning to use the Nelson building, not knock it down and rebuild, but to use the Nelson building. So it's its size which matters to them. So the idea that it might be somewhere else isn't.
Oh no, it was more the noise.
Yeah, that's fine. I just wondered when you started earlier about how you. Yeah.
But we learn in here, and this is our learning space. If there's a load of noise, it's quite distracting. Like even when it's windy in some of the lecture theatres, you do hear the noise, and it's quite distracting.
Yeah, I have an office on the top floor in the Beacon building, and I can attest to how noisy the wind can make it. Absolutely. Yeah.
And also, just one more point quickly. Obviously, you're trying to boost interest in the uni and student numbers. But how is, if you're planning for the future, selling off space that then could be that you might have to buy back, or rebuild places to get back again, that doesn't really make sense when you could just have it there.
We're not anticipating that issue. What we are looking about is making sure we've got the right estate, and should we have a need for more estate, we would be able to build. But we need constantly to regenerate the estate that we have by a mix of refurbishment and new build. And actually, if you compare us with many universities, we've done less of that than many of them have done. Many of them have both new buildings and refurbishments at a rate that we haven't done. And we can't afford to do that because the estate can fall into a level of disrepair that makes it difficult to use, but also increasingly costly to improve.
Go to take a question.
Yeah, I've got a question here. I understand that this area here that used to be college, now university, was built in the late 1960s when there was local British businesses such as General Electric, International Computer Limited, and much more recently, right up till when this became a university, the Digital Equipment Corporation. Does the university still leverage local relations? Does the university still have local relationships with British suppliers around the Staffordshire area, or could the university do with making more out of some new relationships?
It's a good question. I think the Beacon building was built in the late 50s, early 60s, actually.
The Beacon building was built in 1964. If you look at the plaque through the entrance door, it tells you when it was built. But you're right, it was very much built at that time to support the training needs of what was then called English Electric, which was a forerunner of GC and Alstom, which are, as you say, the big companies that are here now. So this site was very much associated with engineering provision at that time, and then it grew gradually to also be involved in computing. So that's really the history of why Stafford campus is very much made up of the programmes it is today. We wouldn't have had Stafford campus if it hadn't been for English Electric, I don't think, at that time.
But the point you make about having good relations with local businesses is important. Yep. So, for example, we are working with Alstom on a project at the moment. We're talking to Perkins, which is part of the Caterpillar empire. It's a bit more difficult sometimes to work with the smaller, medium-sized businesses, but we're constantly trying to work with them, indicate what we can offer in terms of business solutions or programs that they can benefit from. So we're always keen to engage in that work, and that remains a part of our objectives wherever we're based, wherever the programs we deliver are based. That remains one of our key objectives.
I'm going to go to Anne first, and then the gentleman behind, and then yourself. Is that okay?
Yeah, sorry. First of all, I want to say thank you very much for the opportunity for everyone to speak. Appreciate you all coming down. I've got a few little questions. Earlier on, sort of paraphrase you, Michael, you mentioned that you're more inclined to try and keep Blackheath Lane as it is due to the fact that its resale value, etc., being quite low. But do you feel that the reputation of Stafford Hospital perhaps affects the nurses studying here in itself? Recently, this isn't something that's just locally, but even my parents back home in Lincolnshire have heard about the reputation of Stafford Hospital. So obviously, that's going to travel far and wide. So that in itself will have an impact on who is going to want to come and study here. So it's all well and good saying, yeah, we'll keep Blackheath Lane. It's important that our nurses have got somewhere to study. I completely agree, it is important. But if we're not getting the nurses coming here anymore based on Stafford's reputation, then I think that's definitely something to consider. And then obviously, the disorganisation of a move, I feel, could cause massive errors between if I was in a first year and then in my third year I ended up having to move to Stoke, I find that even at the start of the new term sometimes, logistically, your timetables are wrong, just little things like that. I can't imagine the things that are going to go wrong with an entire move of everyone to a different campus, trying to find everything, trying to find everywhere, things being scheduled wrong all over the place. I mean, so for those reasons, are you anticipating or predicting a dip in your sort of graduate results for that period of time?
Okay, the first thing about nursing is that, interestingly enough, applications for nursing or filling the places hasn't been an issue, but is the reputation that the hospital has got as a part of the long-running distressing saga, has that been a factor in our decision-making process? Yes, it has. In fact, I think the hospital is in a very different place from where it was, and actually one of the outcomes has been we have better working relationships with the hospital, therefore able to support our students on placement there better now than perhaps we were 5-10 years ago. But a factor in our thinking, absolutely. It's put Stafford on the map, and some people say any publicity is good publicity. I'm not honestly sure I entirely agree with that. And in fact, the only communication I had before I started here as Vice-Chancellor in January 2011 was from a former student nurse who said, what are you going to do to make sure nobody doubts the quality of my qualification? And that is exactly the sort of thing we've worked on. We are in very good order with the bodies that look at nurse education and nurse training. So genuinely, the students get a good experience and a good qualification. I think then the points you make about impact are fair points. We, for example, have a project at the moment about timetable. The whole objective of that is to get information to students earlier about what their timetable will be, not is once they've started, will be before they start. Because actually, we think that's an important piece of information you should have. For part-time students in particular, it can be extraordinarily important because in some businesses, you have to put in on an annual basis your leave requests. Of course, if you don't know when your assessments are, you don't know when your leave entitlements are, and there are all sorts of other reasons. So that sort of information is information we believe students should have, and we've got a project working to deliver it. I think as a part of the process of working to a move, all those sorts of issues that you mentioned or implied, a whole host of issues, are exactly the sorts of things that we desire to make sure we've thought of and communicated well with students directly affected by any move. Should students beat us up if we get that wrong? Well, the National Student Survey is one way of doing it, but the National Student Survey is about much more. And all I would say is that if you're a final year student, make sure you think about the whole experience of the degree, because you can choose to beat us up on it if you wish. I wouldn't recommend that. If you want to beat us up, talk to us directly. Make the points to us directly. We will listen. We always do. The National Student Survey should be about the entire experience and what you have gained and are gaining as a part of coming here to read for your degree.
Okay, this is more directed.
Sorry, can I just come back in on what else? The other thing you talked about in there was, did we expect an academic dip? I think you said or something. Let's be clear. No, we don't. We've got to be very clear that we have to have a detailed programme of implementation to whatever's decided, and then ensuring that all students get a good, solid, quality education throughout the whole period. However much kind of moving we have is paramount to this process. If we think that's a risk, then we will review the programme. So we do not expect any kind of dip.
Okay. This is more directed to you, Mark, as you're in charge of estates now. Like the parking scheme, for example, I think it's been a little bit of shambles. It's more or less of you put your postcode in, you put holes in, and then you find out that someone else has put holes in, and suddenly it's a residence that no one can now have a parking permit for. I mean, the actual company that's in charge of it, I had numerous emails with them just to try and get a parking permit in time to stop myself getting, a fine. Eventually I did. Their customer service was fantastic, by the way. But the problem is, it was a lot of talk to the people in Stafford. Okay, I talk to them. No, you need to talk back to them. And it's just one hand not talking to the other. Anyway, I've got a parking permit, so fantastic. The thing is, I know a lot of people don't, and it just doesn't seem like anything's being done about it. And then, with regards to halls now, it's a small thing, but all the cigarette buckets have been taken away. So apparently, fair enough, you want to be funny about smokers, that's fine. I'm a smoker, I'll admit I don't care. But the fact that you're saying, no, we're not going to put bins there for you, so everyone's just throwing their fag ends on the floor. And then, Michael made a comment about, these quality of estates is going to go down over time. And of course that's true with wear and tear. But if you're not even going to give us a facility to dispose of our rubbish, then, of course it's going to be horrible. The grass, every time it rains, is just a sea of fag ends floating down, That's certainly not what people who are coming to view the university are expected to see. Now again, in terms of what someone else mentioned about jobs earlier, I understand, like, obviously earlier on in the year when the cleaners were sort of sacked, the problem was, a lot of people had already been to view the rooms. And I understand why, from a business point of view, you obviously can tell the cleaners, that you're considering layoffs, etc. But a lot of the students were told, have, ensuite or don't have ensuite. But if you don't have ensuite, you're going to get rooms cleaned and everything. So a lot of people were coming expecting that service there. And then obviously when they arrived, that definitely wasn't the case. And when I was helping move-in weeks and helping people move in and stuff, there was a lot of people who were a bit irate about it, purely because a lot of the people that do go to Stafford are quite introverted, and some of the parents really did need that extra level of comfort from the people in the estates of like, look, it's okay, we have cleaners go around, they pick up on little things as well, like if someone's down or depressed and things like that, and that sort of really little level of care has now sort of gone. And then I know, Mark, again, you mentioned about Unitemps. I know they've been around for a while, but again, I've got to say, I think the service that they've provided so far hasn't really been very good, to be honest. I applied for a cleaning job in Halls last year. I did actually get the job. I worked there the previous year, but me and my friend, we wondered why we didn't get interviews, so we spoke to Judy Ryder over at these days, only to be told that she was never even sent our applications, which we took into Unitemps. So that begs the question of what happened to those. Then all of our payslips would constantly get sent to Stoke. So we'd have to go in and request them be sent to Stafford, which personally I don't think is something that we should have to do. They should know where we live and send them to the appropriate locations. And then once again with like P45 when I finished, they were like, oh yeah, you actually have to request that we have that sent to you, as opposed to, you know, just turn up in the post like most normal jobs, because they said they like to keep it on file so they can re-employ you easily enough. It just seems like, you know, it's not really what I'm looking for.
I think it was me rather than Mark who talked about Unitemps.
Oh, sorry.
Take the pressure off him for a time. Unitemps is relatively new, that's not an excuse for what you said. If you can email me with specific details of what you described this afternoon, then I'd like to take it further with my colleagues, because we're really looking to make Unitemps the most efficient and effective service that we possibly can. And these are examples of we've had other examples of this kind, not too many hopefully, but every time we get them, we really want to look into them and find out what's happening. I mean, particularly sending your payslip to the wrong site and things like that, seems to me to be bizarre that can happen. So I really want to take that further, so email me. I mean, my address is on the uni website, obviously. Send me an email with the details.
I mean, Ken to the Unitemps question. Quite a few of the others probably kind of sit on my doorstep. So certainly parking does, and I think you know, we've had. I'll be very open. We've had a lot of problems with parking in implementing the new scheme, and I've apologised to staff and students, and I'll do it again. I'm quite happy to apologise here. And that doesn't help me, I accept. You know, Stafford is different for parking, and we know that. And actually, the bigger issues are on the Stoke campus. We've really tried to improve that, and it is about making a safe environment, because we had some issues about access for emergency vehicles and everything else. But we didn't get the process right, and I apologise for any inconvenience, and we are trying to improve that. And I will certainly take some of the comments or the comments you've made on board and feed that back to our parking team. And we work with the provider to try and get the best service, and we do monitor them on service, so any feedback we get on them as well is useful. But you know, in terms of the parking zones, there are rules, and if we didn't apply them right to start with, then I say I do apologise. But parking is always going to be a challenge for universities, and with this campus it has been lucky, and that's one of the factors we have to take into account. You know, and it is a challenge, and if we were moving to Stoke, then parking is up there as one of the biggest issues we need to deal with, and we're not hiding from that or shirking from that at this point in time. We've got to find some solutions, so it will be key going forwards. The smoking one, another one is, again, we'll take some feedback on that. We have been looking at the smoking policy, but also, you know, smoking shelters, smoking bins, what's our policy and how do we deploy it? And again, I'll take that feedback back to the team.
I definitely think that, you know, just because one thing's good for Stoke, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for Stafford. I mean, I personally didn't really think there was that much problem with the parking here to begin with. I understand that there's a lot of problems with it in Stoke, but, you know, I don't really think we benefited from this at all in any way, because the car park's still quite empty all the time.
And that's a fair comment, and it's something we did debate about. Do we treat everybody the same, or do we treat the two campuses different?
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to Anne, Chris, then I'll take the gentleman with the glasses and then the person behind you. So, Anne.
Hi. Must bear with me, I'm a bit anxious. I just wanted to address some things that I thought were inconsistent with what you're saying and what has been in recent press in Stafford. I mean, for one, there were surveys supposed to have been taken, but then there was a massive backlash, and lots of students jumped on Facebook and are saying, no, we love Stafford campus. But the papers are saying that, well, you're saying that no one here likes this campus, if you recall. And also that, I mean, you've had this going on for a year, talking about the possible move, and I thought that you had quite an exacting figure. I don't remember what it was, something like 7.8 million. You've already worked out is how much it would cost to move all of Stafford to Stoke, which something new faces.
Sorry.
But one of the things I picked up on in the newspaper was that businesses only claimed to have been consulted around about a month ago, which is when the paper was released, when you've had about a year to speak to them. It makes me feel like you're not really taking them into consideration. I just wanted to pick up on a point that Mrs. Lady up there mentioned about redundancies, and I don't think it's good enough for you to say that you haven't taken that into consideration at all. or you haven't got an exact figure. I mean, people should be sticking up for this town and the people who are going to have job losses. I mean, it's union staff, it's cleaners, it's probably even lecturers. I don't think they're safe. I mean, moving everyone to Stoke, you're going to lose people in the process, aren't you? I mean, you're talking about reputation as one of your key areas, but how can someone claim to be staff when you're not acting ethically towards all? I mean, are you taking consideration to people in town and all of these people who you're going to make redundant?
I'd be wary about trusting everything as gospel that you read in the newspaper. partly because I think the first point was we've never said that all students love or all students hate Stafford.
How did it get into the paper?
Well, I think a misinterpretation of what was said. But our survey data makes clear that of the students currently in Stafford, far more like Stafford and want to stay in Stafford than want to move. We're not pretending anything else other than that in our representation of the data, and certainly going to the Board of Governors, it is very clear that that is the case. So I think that's important. I've no idea where the figure comes from. I'm sorry.
Memory, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, we've got some idea of cost of figures. Of course we have. We take very seriously the consequences of the staff move. Of the potential move to Stoke on staff here. I'm just choosing not in this venue to share it. Don't misread that as being that doesn't matter. It matters enormously. But who should I tell first? Who should I talk to first about that?
Everyone involved?
The staff we employ. That's who deserve to hear that first. The move won't take place for some time. Bear that in mind. And it's not all worked out in detail. We expect to take, if we move, all the courses that are currently taught in computing and technology to Stoke-on-Trent. We're not dropping courses on the way. If there are courses dropped on the way, it will, as I said earlier, be owing to student demand, students not wanting the programme.
What about the impact on business in the town?
We tried to take that into account. Fair, we didn't talk to the businesses earlier than a month ago. That doesn't mean to say we haven't taken into account what the views of businesses would be. We've worked with the Borough Council as well as the County Council. We've talked to the Chamber earlier. So we tried to take those views into account. Should we have talked to them earlier? Arguably, yes. But the decision's not made until next week.
What was the outcome of discussing with them?
Well, I couldn't be there, so Mark was there.
We had some breakfast meetings with both businesses in the kind of Stoke area and in the Stafford area. I guess generally the kind of feedback is they reflected the student views. So Stafford businesses want the university in Stafford and Stoke wants the university in Stoke.
So is it fair to say that students want to be here and the business of the town wants the campus to be here?
Of course the town wants the campus to be here. Yeah, let's be clear. I mean, they want it for the profile, the presence, the students, the business, and that is part of our consideration. We don't ignore these facts, but we've got to put everything into the melting pot and consider it. It's back to it is financial, it is student experience, it's investment, it's future, it's everything together. So it's very complex analysis, and it's a very difficult decision for the Board of Governors to make. I'm sure there'll be a lot of debate, and there's a lot to be taken into account. Just on the staff side, we're not in a position to share any numbers, but we have talked about that the move, if it does happen, will give us some financial efficiencies to reinvest. And if that happens, then potentially there will be
efficiencies. These are people's lives.
Yeah, but we also clearly do reflect that universities are about people. All your learning comes from the staff, and whether it's the academic staff teaching you, or the support staff which are enabling that, or are looking after accommodation or cleaning the facilities. and we're acutely aware of impact that any changes will have on them. And we do take that into account. And that's one of the things we'll consider. But yeah, I don't want people going away thinking they're being dismissed or their views aren't taken into account. They're essential to giving you a good experience here. So if there is an impact on them, you know, it's with reluctance, you know, it's with a sad heart if people are affected. You know, it's nothing I would like to do. I don't get any pleasure from anything like that. But it's about the best experience we can give to all the students, and we do take into account the staff. We've got some good staff here. You know, if you ask people what stands out about Staffordshire University, it's a friendly place. You've got committed staff. They want to teach people to learn. They engage. And generally, if I cut anybody and ask anybody, that's at the top of their list. And we must always remember that. We certainly remember that all the time. And it will be a key part of decision making.
And the last meeting we're offering on the estate strategy is with staff next Tuesday at 5 o'clock, at 4:30. That's the last possible meeting, so they have the last say in that sense in the consultation process. You also, I think, in coming back, we're asking about the student position. It's more students who are currently in Stafford would want to stay in Stafford than don't.
I had a friend of mine who is a member of staff has tried to get a mortgage and has been declined because they work at Staffordshire University, and because this is
We'll clarify detail like that as early as we possibly can, but it'll be quite some way down the road before anybody directly affected by this in terms of their job would know.
I'm just conscious of time. I'm really sorry to move this on, but we've got supposed to have 10 minutes. I'm going to extend to 13:15. I'd really like to get the last few questions through, so I'm going to stick with Chris in the interest of fairness and the order that I said, and then I'll go to that row of people there. So Chris?
Just because you said the year early on, you were saying about the move possibly happening 2015, 2016 or 2016, but then you said you wouldn't rule the possibility of 2015. So for me, it seems a bit silly. Like, I don't want to sound ungrateful here because it's a very big investment, but for example, the game sector's got a new mocap studio. It's got a brand new, lab that's going to be, opening this semester. Why have that then if it's only going to be used a year? Then move to Stoke, where the availability of that is going to be significantly less, with all the students being there at one place. I mean, for me personally, I'm a third year now, so it's not going to affect me. But if I was a first year now, and I was moving to Stoke for my third year, and I was doing motion capture, for example, the period for me to use that is down, massively, because you're in such a big campus.
That's fair comment, but remember there are no programs duplicated across the two campuses. And as far as I'm aware, I might be wrong about this, but as far as I'm aware, for example, there's no program in Stafford that would need to use the motion capture studio.
I know that, but it's in the case where if you have to move the facilities up there, I mean, obviously, if you're getting built now, there must be something in the contract that says, oh, we'll allow you to build this now if you get the same kind of space in Stoke if it was to move up there, right?
Yeah.
So where I'm coming from is, it just seems silly to have that there if you're going to have.
I think it's fair comment that but remember, at any point in time, we will be potentially, if we move, shortening the life of something that has a bit more life in it. But if we were to be controlled by that, we'd never do anything. So at some point we have to make the decision and do something. But the idea is to be transferring the same sort of facilities if we move to Stoke as are currently available in Stafford.
I think just a key message from me here at this point is it just demonstrates that we're not stopping investing here. We're not saying there's a decision coming at some point and the students here today will not get as good an experience because you've stopped investing, you've written us off because either you're going to move us or you might move us. We clearly recognise that whatever happens, we've got to look after all our students. make sure they have a good experience, whether it's here or in Stoke. So, you know, you could say the same about the Nelson Library move, you could say about the investment in games design, and there's lots of things we are still investing in Stafford on this campus, and we will continue to do so up until, well, as long as it's required. You know, up until a decision is made, and then beyond until the end of that cohort running through, or whatever. We're acutely aware of it. It's come up in discussions on the committee structures. The governors have asked us about it, because we cannot and will not write off any set of students. And I'll assure you of that here. And it was going to be one of my summing up messages at the end, that I want you to go away believing and trusting that we will give you a good experience while you're here at this university. And we're committed to that as part of this process.
I mean, I do want to say that, I mean, I want to say again that I am grateful for that investment. It's just, if that investment had come a bit sooner, then this wouldn't have been a problem.
But there's always something else next down the line, isn't there?
Yeah.
And it's about, you can't, it's the cycle just goes on, and we're continuing it going on and on until there's clear rationale, and we can look at when students are going to need it and when they'll no longer need it.
And the particular example is something that, I think the particular example is something that broke down. We put something in place as fast as we were able to do so. But it does demonstrate the general point, which is that we're prepared to invest even if programmes are leaving Stafford, because your experience is a once experience. We're looking at students coming in repeated occasions, but we have to remember that each student is a student once with us, and each student matters as much as any other student. So you've got to have the right experience, absolutely.
Really quickly.
Yeah, see on the recruitment front, I just want to know, like, how widespread is your recruitment programme in terms of, like, nationwide or even other countries? Because I know, or for me being from Belfast, we get Liverpool John Muirs and stuff coming over to us to recruit. I want to know if the university's prepared to do something like that.
The short answer is yes, we are. We are constantly asking questions about whether we are marketing ourselves and recruiting in the right areas, whether there are areas that we should be working that we're not. And we do recruit internationally as well, and we are currently revisiting the recruitment strategy that we've got for international students as well. Thank you.
Going to the gentleman in the leather jacket and glasses.
Thank you. In the introduction, you mentioned that one of the options was possible move towards the centre of Stafford. Could you talk some more about that? Does the university already hold a state in the centre of Stafford?
We don't have anything in the centre of Stafford at the moment, but whatever is here, we would explore the possibility of a town centre move. It probably wouldn't, you know, if we move nothing from Stafford, then it's not an option. I think it was just, even though we're not massive, it would be too big. But if, for example, nursing, midwifery and our other health sciences programmes were here and everything else had moved to Stoke, we would much rather be in the town centre. Because if we were in the town centre, the students would have a better experience and we would have more of an impact on the town. If you think about the nursing and midwifery students, they're only here 50% of the time, because 50% of the time they're on placement. A lot of them live locally. So actually the likelihood of them having an impact on the town is relatively small, especially if they're off campus. And our students who are on campus more would have more of an impact if they were in the town than out of the town. So we would wish to explore that, but we would have to be in a position to be able to take advantage of any offers. We've talked to to people about what our options might be and how we might be able to fund that, but it is on our agenda should the decision be to move some of our provision to Stoke, and then size becomes an issue, and we would be able, for example, to be closer to Stafford College, which already delivers higher education, i.e. our own programmes, and so there could be a healthier mix of higher education students in the centre of Stafford.
Thank you. Was there still a question up there? Quickly, thank you.
I've just got two little points if possible. The first one is, mainly I'm from Stoke originally, and when I graduated from college, basically it should be around Stoke campus, and I chose not to go there simply because of the mess the town's in and the mess of the university itself. Since then, I went and did some research and spoke to people that had previously been here, which is why I originally applied for the course. If I'd known it had been in Stoke, I wouldn't have gone for it. And I don't think I'm the only person that's got this really topic. But that's my main concern really. And the second one is, with me only being the first year, it will affect me if it's to go place. And also, at the minute, you've got people applying for the next year, which currently states that computing is again in Stafford. And I think that because of that situation, you're going to have people applying again for Stafford, and to get disrupted again by saying, oh, you're going to Stoke instead. I just think, at the wider picture of anything, it's not going to work with the people that are here currently. That's what I have.
Yeah, I mean, on the first point, it is very definitely one of the issues that is addressed in the information that will go to the Board of Governors. First of all, the university hasn't been in good shape in Stoke in terms of the investment in the facilities available to support learning. That's now much better than it was. But secondly, also, what's happening to Stoke. Stoke is a more vibrant city than Stafford is a town centre, but it could be a lot better. Stoke isn't exactly a city of destination. That is a factor in our thinking. I absolutely recognise that, and I don't, you know, I'm not I'm, believe it or not, Staffordshire born, but the place I was born isn't any longer in the county. And my family, both my sides of my family, are from North Staffordshire. But that has absolutely no effect upon the decision making or the view of there is a bit of a risk moving to Stoke. You're absolutely right. We've not been able to talk to applicants because at the moment there isn't a decision. And will it affect first years? Well, we said we might have to explore that, but we will come back and talk to the first years. So it's not a fait accompli that if we move it will affect the first years, but that if we need to explore that, we will come back and talk to you about what the right options are for what would be your final year. It won't be before that.
Thank you. I'm going to take two final questions, just because the two that I look at haven't actually had a chance to speak. So, Tom?
Yeah. Is there a direct correlation between the recruitment and knowledge of the campus closing? Because as it decreases, everyone started finding out that this consultation is happening.
That's a good question.
Because
yeah, I'm just trying to think of the latest data I see, because I mean, not in terms of any comments we've had made that I'm aware of, and it would require the schools here to have a higher reduction or challenge in student recruitment than anywhere else, and I'm not aware that there's any such thing.
What I've been told is the student main consensus is that they don't want to come to Stafford University because they believe it's not for them anymore. Because if they wanted to come to Stafford campus because they wanted to stay local,
yeah,
they don't want to travel to Stoke. If they want to go somewhere separate, they go to somewhere else in the country. And the last quick question is, when will the announcement be about the...
Okay, well, the first, we've got no evidence that supports your first proposition at all. There will be people in that position, but we're not aware that it's a general proposition, no. When will it be announced? It will be announced on the 30th of January, because a decision has to be made on the 29th, so it will be announced that morning.
That's two very good questions. First of all, let's say, hypothetically, we do move to Stoke. We are Staffordshire University, and let's say we have no campus in Stafford. Would you go through a rebanding to change the name Stafford to Stoke University? It does seem a little bit farcical to have a place called Staffordshire University and not have a campus in Stafford.
Well, the first thing is we will have provision in Stafford, because the provision that's in health sciences will remain in Stafford. So we will be in Stafford. We are in Lichfield, and we have provision in our colleges, which are in Staffordshire. So I don't accept the proposition that if we move computing and technology, that we therefore have to rebrand and become the University of something else. Will anybody ask us that question? I'm sure we'll be asked that question. You don't rebrand, rename yourself without an enormous amount of effort and work goes into it.
You mentioned computing, because obviously that's one of the courses you're looking to move over to Stoke.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a computer science student, second year, and I'm taking another module this year. And I was given a choice of 3. I picked 1, and until last week, I thought it was all fine. Only to find out these 3 aren't running anymore. And I've been put on one which I had no say over, none of the choices.
Right.
Second of all, I've been hearing things that a lot of these computer courses here are shutting, modules at least, are shutting down, which leads me to believe that computer science is not a priority for this university anymore, which is a huge mistake, in my opinion.
I wouldn't disagree with your final statement. Computer science is very important for us. It has been for a very long time. If what's happening there, it's got nothing to do with the estate strategy. It's got nothing to do with the decision to move. I'd be happy for you to email me with the details, and I'll see what we can find out. But
as these things seem to be coming at the same time,
I agree, and it's easy to draw the conclusion that you have. I agree, but it has nothing to do with the estate strategy. So the module changes that you've talked about have not come to executive, which if they were linked to the estate strategy, they would have done so.
I'd just like to say as well, just because we need to move on, that's something that absolutely should be bringing up as well with the Students' Union, because you've got a designated officer in the form of Alice Wilcox that does deal with things like that, and she can take those things up directly. Alice is just at the back waving. This probably isn't, like Michael said, appropriate for that, but we'd be more than happy to talk to you at the end of that, just to take on your concerns and queries to do with academic stuff. Did you have something burning?
No.
Exactly. Thank you very much. So I just think, sorry to have to wrap it up. I know obviously a lot of people in the room have got a lot that they still probably want to say, but I just want to say thank you to everybody for being in attendance today. I'm sure that you'll all agree this was obviously a very constructive and useful meeting, and I hope that you'll leave today feeling sort of better informed and have had all your questions answered. And thank you so much as well to the panel for being on hand, I think, to answer all the questions in the room and to sort of give students some more clarity. Lots of your comments have obviously been recorded by the union and university, and are really, like Michael said, are going to help shape the Board of Governors in the decision next week. So that you're aware, the final decision will be made on the evening of Wednesday the 29th of January, and all students, like Michael alluded to, will be notified of the decision the following morning. For anyone wanting to understand more about the decision or to discuss the outcome, your officers will be available throughout the week, but we will specifically be in the lounge next week Thursday from 12 PM to talk to. So just thank you again for anything, and don't feel that any questions that haven't been answered you can't actually directly raise with myself, the team, or any of the exec members via their emails, because I think the fact they've turned up today means they are obviously willing to listen and take your comments on board. So just thank you to everyone for joining us today, and I hope that you've enjoyed the meeting.
Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you very much.
Thank you.